The other one that occurs to me now off the top of my head is the CHIPS Act in America, where they're putting vast amounts into, into chip producing. And I know there's an aspiration, I think, in the UK to have more technology independence there as well, but we don't have anything comparable, really.
It's a different background, isn't it? The US has got at least one of the major fabs, up to the minute. Yeah, for sure. Can make components.
Well, they're a bit short. Intel's a bit short of TSMC and Samsung at the moment.
But
they won't thank me for saying.
They're in the
they're up there.
It's there or thereabouts.
They're good. Yeah. They're a solid third. Yeah. I'll give them that.
They have aspirations to be ahead.
Yeah. Well, they were once. Well, they've as it's been well publicised, they kind of felt.
But there's something to build on there, which in the UK there is no fact. In terms of bulk CMOS, anyway, in compound semiconductor,
we're quite good there, aren't we? Apparently,
exactly, yeah.
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. We're back in the studio after larking about in Paris last week. And I'm delighted to say we've got a special guest this week, which is Nick Johnson, who is the head of UKTIN. And that doesn't mean that he's into some kind of mining. It means TIN stands for, and I can just see on your letterhead, I can read it upside down, Telecoms Innovation Network.
Very done. Well done.
So welcome, Nick. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Scott.
And you had to brave the elements to get here.
I did.
Particularly stormy, rainy day. This is recorded on Thursday in the UK when we got Hurricane Kieran, or whatever it's called.
I don't get that.
Basically, we get a bit of rain. It's got to have a name here.
They always used to name them after women, didn't they? And then it was deemed to be a bit sexist.
But bloke's all right.
Now you can name either men or women. I think equal opportunities for hurricanes.
I just think it's funny.
Is it an actual hurricane?
No, of course it's not.
What is it? I don't know what's classed as a hurricane.
It's just a bit of rain.
It's a
bit of rain. Kieran is what it's called.
It's a pretty bad storm though. It's 100 miles an hour in Jersey.
That's true. All right, fair enough. I take it all back. Sorry if anyone's having a hard time in Jersey. If that seemed insensitive.
That's France.
Yeah, it's France. We don't care.
Careful.
So well done on several fronts there, Nick. And it's great to have you here. What else have we got to talk about? Yeah, just the weather, really. We're gonna go and have some cocktails with Vodafone later, aren't we?
It's a Christmas do. It seems very early to have a Christmas do.
Bit early for Christmas do. Well, they said the real treat that's in store for us is we get an early sight of their Christmas TV ad.
It should be a Guy Fawkes do, really.
Should be.
But I think he's probably
politically
incorrect these days.
We're only a couple of days after Halloween. But then they'd make us dress up in stupid ways.
They would, yeah.
A bit like you've got on your byline on light reading.
Yeah, I know.
How long are you going to keep that?
I'm not changing it until I get told to by Phil, because it looks much better.
They've got on light reading, they've got like ghoulish images for their bylines.
Yeah.
We're not that wacky at Telecoms.com / can't be asked. So that's that. So I'm not going to bother with too much prattle and preamble because we're up against it on time. So we're gonna start by just chatting to Nick about UKTIN, which was formally formed in April of this year. Is that right?
It was launched in April.
Yeah.
Yes. So we had a bit of a run up to that.
Bit of a run up.
Yes.
Yeah. And just what it's all about basically, and see where that takes us. And then we got a couple of bits of news that broke this week that I think will be interesting to talk about, and hopefully you'll be happy to share your views on, Nick. One is this big AI get-together that we had in the UK, which seems to have some sort of political prestige associated with it, because AI is obviously a global issue, and yet people like Elon Musk and whoever have flown in just for this in the UK. So look at little old us hosting a big global event. And then some announcement came from it, and we'll have a little look at that and see whether we should care. And then we're also just got a few little bits of news to do with operators that have broken in the past week. We've got BT's quarterlies today. We've got Vodafone selling its Spanish arm. We've got some quarterlies and some M&A news from Virgin Media O2 as well. So we're going to just loosely stitch all that together, and we might even go with Ian's hilarious headline of a week or two of the telecoms industry is rotten to the core.
Well, that's quite old now, that. But,
but I don't think we've spoken about it on the pod.
Yeah.
And it did get a lot of reads. So anyway, I just think it's a nice, fun, provocative headline. Obviously, I don't think it's completely rotten. I completely agree.
Would you say it's ran down?
Yeah. Do you know what? It hadn't even occurred to me till we talked about it just now that the core bit was a deliberate pun. I thought, I just thought he just felt like taking a run up and writing something really really shitty about the industry. So that's that. So yeah, we'll get straight into it. I don't have a leading question. Why don't I just pass the ball straight to you and just from the top line to people who aren't familiar with UKTIN, what's it all about?
Yeah, good question. What's it all about? Yeah, so yes. So another story just running through my head there. I'm choosing not to tell it.
That's live podcasting for you.
Anyway, so UKTIN, UK Telecoms Innovation Network. It's clues in the name, right? It's telecoms. It's about innovation, and it's a network of of working groups, of people, of organisations, of structures, of processes to get UK innovators back in the game in one form or another.
And so you say back in the game, and this sort of touches on one of I'm sort of position me. I'm a little bit of a sort of small government, laissez-faire kind of guy. Mm-hmm. That's not to say I don't think we should have a government, and it's certainly not to say that I don't think.
You're a complete anarchist.
I'm not a complete anarchist, no, obviously. But I always think anytime.
Don't worry about your pension fund. That's my position on anarchy. Anything's okay. My pension fund. Right?
Yeah, well, quite. Yeah, and any other time where the state is useful to me, I'm suddenly not an anarchist. What was I going to say? But I do think it's relevant to interrogate any time the state gets involved in what would otherwise be a sort of private sector matter. So why is that? Why does the UK government think it has a role to play in this?
Well, I think it's about how capitalism evolves, right? I mean, I think, and it's not exactly a new thing. I mean, look what. So let's focus on the here and now. So there's been lots of examples in history where things have evolved, things have consolidated down too far. The particular trigger for this was, back in the day. Well, I mean, so a little bit of background here from me is actually relevant. So, in my previous job, I was the CTO and founder of a small cell business called IP Access, which was bought by Mavenir in 2020.
Oh yes,
I remember.
I joined those dots. Have you joined those dots?
I didn't know Nick was at IP Access.
Yeah.
So I should have
founder of it.
Looked at his CV better than
we should
have.
What you're saying is we should have done some research before the pod. Oh well, okay. A bit late to start now, isn't it?
So don't worry about it.
So you were the founder of IP Access, we're very familiar with that.
So back when it founded 2000, radio 2000, there were something like 9 or 10 radio access network equipment vendors, something like that. Bit more, bit less.
Right.
And over
in 2000?
In 2000, yeah. So relatively recently. So you had Alcatel and Lucent and Nokia and Ericsson. Nortel, all as separate businesses.
Motorola
was still doing commercial networks, only does security networks now. And they've all come together as a so now it's 3, 4, and
only 2 main ones that we're allowed to play with.
Yeah, exactly. So the commercial kind of evolution brings us down to a very small number of players.
Yeah.
And then something kicks off that is above our pay grade and it becomes 2.
Yeah.
And then who knows what happens next, and it might become 1. And then you're in a monopoly situation.
Certainly if their last quarterlies are in to go by.
So, well, that's a general issue, isn't it? That actually, the industry itself is fully evolved. You could putting it in that way. Everybody's got a smartphone. Coverage. Yeah. Everyone moans about coverage, but actually, it's not. In percentage terms, how many more base stations you need? Not really. You don't really need that many more base stations.
So
to get all the way
you're
out.
talking that in the context of the potential for total market growth. Yeah.
And so the only growth you've got actually is generational growth, right? So you've got as one generation succeeds the other, and that's people are kind of wised up a little bit to that 5G. People already have been asking questions about why 5G for quite a long time.
Yeah. And most of the vibes about 6G that I'm hearing are just like it's not even going to be an event.
It's a software upgrade. I mean, I think that's a version that
what we're going to write about.
Yeah. Well, that was the NGMN's take, wasn't it? Recently, this is like a club of operators. They came out with that white paper saying, they want it to be a software upgradable thing. And then I know when I've talked to people like Howard Watson, for instance, at BT in the past, he's like, I think I asked him once, is 6G going to be another big sort of equipment upgrade, and he went, we're not doing that again.
Yeah.
So
So the innovation that's happening now is less about growth than about cost reduction.
Yeah.
Right. So, by which I mean operating cost reduction. Right. You've got to find ways of reducing the power consumption of your network, find ways of reducing the operational cost of your network. How much does it cost you to fix it when it breaks, or things like, I mean, the coverage issue is still an issue, right? It's still patchy and not as good as it should be, and there are still political incentives to get it extended out all the way to the edge. I
remember early on seeing that a political driver for coverage once was David Cameron when he was Prime Minister. Once went on holiday in Norfolk and couldn't check the football scores when he was on the beach, and that became
almost sounds more of a Boris Johnson thing.
Yeah,
no, the first Prime Minister, Robert Walpole.
Mm-hmm. He couldn't get Wi-Fi either.
No, there was only one bridge, and once he was late for something, and they used to use these boats. Right. And it was like he was late for something. They looked at him like, "I'm not taking you on my boat." So then he was like, "Okay, we're building
more bridges."
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, often it can be as simple as
history repeating itself. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I mean the consolidation that you're talking about, which I think is been quite dramatic over that 20-year period, and then we've gone down to, everybody says 3 big vendors because they seem to have sort of 80%-ish of the market. But do you think? I mean, the reasons that happened, because people would say, well, market forces, it's like the semiconductor industry. You need this enormous scale to produce low-cost equipment and have those global economies, and to have a system that works worldwide. To try to fight it's quite a hard thing to do. Do you think some of it happened maybe for? I mean, there's a lot has been blamed on the Chinese, hasn't it? I know that they've they came in with Huawei and ZTE, and perhaps some of the pricing was unfair, not on WTA rules.
Which slightly overlaps with my sort of state intervention.
But I'm curious to, I like the idea of having other companies in and more competition, because we don't want to have a monopoly or a duopoly. But it just seems like it was in some ways a natural thing for it to kind of head that way. And
it is. I mean, it is a natural thing. It is part of the evolution of consolidations happen and have happened throughout history. But then you get to a point when it's over consolidated and things need to get broken up. Right? Look at AT&T. Right? Yeah. Back in the day, right? It did everything. Right? It ran a telephone network and it invented the transistor. Right?
Yeah, it's like the Standard Oil of the telecom
exactly.
sector.
And look back to Standard Oil, same deal, right? I mean, there were some other things going on there which probably don't need to talk about, but it's the same deal, right? You've got to a point where it's all in a very small number of people's hands, and that's not really very healthy, I think. And
so was IP Access on the RAN side?
Yes, we were a RAN.
So you were an example of a RAN startup, and maybe this is where you're heading. I don't hear about many RAN startups now. So is this kind of what part of the point of this is like, we've got the consolidation, there's natural consolidation, you were bought by Mavenir, M&A happens all the time. But while there are the forces of consolidation, the forces of unconsolidation, if that's a word. What's the opposite? Diversification. Yes. There we are. Should be in the form of startups and new businesses, shouldn't they? So is that my
emotional kind of commitment to?
Well, and also does that fit into the narrative of UKTIN on the whole?
So UKTIN is came out of the diversification agenda for sure. Yeah, it did, and part of that diversification agenda. I mean, the nomenclature has subtly shifted. I don't know if you pick this up, but people are talking less about diversification now and more about resilience of the supply chain. Right? So diversification is important because it allows that resilience to happen. Operators and big operators and small ones don't need to rely on a very small number of vendors, and having a diversity of scale of those vendors allows diversity of scale of markets. Right. So as private networks emerge as a thing, then they can buy from a range of different vendors. They don't have to kind of go cap in hand to the big ones and sort of, please, can you sell me 3 base stations? Where they'll get no attention at all, right? So that helps that sort of little bubbling under of a new market emerging.
Do you think things are better than they were a few years ago?
I mean, it's much better than they were.
But if we go back to sort of like 2019, 2020, I guess, when a lot of this pushback against Huawei came in, and then we had government rules in to remove it, which is going on at the moment. And Nokia wasn't perhaps in the best shape with its 5G strategy. And I sort of sense that a lot of the concern came out of, well, everything's going to be Ericsson. But going forwards now to almost 2024 with missions like Open RAN and various diversification strategies, not just in the UK, but elsewhere, do you think things are significantly better now? And we have people like Samsung, don't we, I suppose, and NEC, but
they're on the move, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think things have shifted. Like you used to think of NEC, for instance. This is one that's in my mind. You used to think of NEC as a pure equipment play. Right?
Yeah.
Now it's about orchestration. You look at their material; it's all about management, network orchestration. They're looking at the cloud as their playground now, rather than kit.
Yeah.
That's. I'm just saying what I read from there. I don't have any particular inside information there, but just from what I read of their material.
And in terms of the UK role in this, I mean, has that changed a lot? Has a lot come out of this? What you've been doing and what the government has been doing at a strategic level in terms of trying to get some of these companies like IP Access onto the world stage, taken more seriously, out there with opportunities in front of them.
I think it's emerging. I think the where we're active, for the most part, is a little bit smaller than IP Access. I mean, we had at its peak, IP Access was a $50 million revenue company.
Yeah.
And we don't have many equipment vendors of that scale around at the moment. So we're building up to that again, with that diversification thing, trying to find people who can put the components together.
Which is why you got the gig. You seem sort of almost uniquely qualified within the UK to do that sort of thing. I'm not just saying that because they're in front of me.
It's kind of you to say. I kind of agree, actually. I think the other members of the consortium are, we haven't talked much about UKTIN itself, but UKTIN is a consortium of University of Bristol, Cambridge Wireless, Digital Catapult, and West Midlands 5G, which was one of the 5G tests.
What is Cambridge? Because we were talking about this before we came on, and we're both aware of Cambridge Wireless as a company that does stuff in the wireless area, obviously, as the name implies, but we're not quite sure exactly what it does. And they organise a lot of events.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's it, pretty much. It's an event organiser. Right. It's a marketing function for UKTIN. So it does. It organises all of our Marcoms. So Amandeep, through a couple of layers, comes into Cambridge Wireless. Conferences, UKTIN has an events programme rolling out over the next 18 months or so.
Yeah.
Until the spending review. So lifetime. So UKTIN, if that's not clear to our listeners, it's a project. It has a lifetime, which is alongside a lot of other projects. Will finish at the 2025 spending review. So.
Oh, is it? So you got a couple of years to sort stuff out.
We have got a couple of years to sort stuff out. Interestingly, the emphasis has slightly shifted so I joined in February, and
move your phone down a bit. Sorry.
They interfere with his microphone. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
We should have said that at the start. So our bad.
Still doing GSM. You still get the in there?
Something like that.
Oh, it takes me back.
So I was going to ask you, maybe it's a good time for you to have founded a RAN company. Yeah. You presumably you weren't before that just like a builder, and you thought, oh no, what, I'm going to have a go at RAN. So you must have a fairly big track record prior to that as well.
Well, I wouldn't say particular. So before that. So IP Access was a spin-out of the Technology Partnership, which is one of those consultancies that rings Cambridge.
Right.
Like PA Consulting, Cambridge
Silicon Fen, all that.
Sagentia, TTP, there's a few others. And TTP had a project that it ran for, so this is going back a bit now. So when I joined TTP in the late 80s, this dates me, right? So,
yeah.
So I finished a post.
Believe me, the late 80s are very familiar to me as well.
I can't quite remember them myself. But anyway, so I joined TTP in the late 80s, and at that point they had a little project, fixed wireless access project going for British Aerospace in Indonesia, using the brand new pan-European digital cellular standard called Groupe Spécial Mobile, GSM, as it was in French back then, right? And
French, Pierre, look at that. Didn't
you
you do well?
Yeah. So there was a vote, actually, it might be interesting. There was a vote in ETSI back in the day about whether the specs should be in French or English. Did you believe that? Yeah.
So it should have been SMG, really.
There is, yes, there is. SESMG is the name of the special mobile group, exactly. So anyway, you can edit all that out.
We don't edit.
No, okay.
No, afraid not.
No.
Afraid not. That's there forever now.
Anyway, so history. So TCP had a group which built this fixed wireless access project based on GSM, and it finished up with that with a lump of software, and a radio design and some computing platform that it thought, well, we could make a GSM handset out of this, couldn't we? That's a nice idea. And there's this emerging thing. And it ended up partnering with Analog Devices to create a reference design for third parties to build GSM handsets. And it made a storming business out of that, and ended up floating around the time IP Access was founded, so 2000-ish, and right in the middle of the telecoms winter, you may remember.
Yeah,
great timing. Yeah. It
depends which bit of 2000. 2000 was a mad year. If you did it at the start,
no, I think it was actually in 2001.
Right, yeah, not so good.
Anyway, so that was the background. That was my background. So I was part of TCP. I wasn't really directly involved in this project, but kind of I was close to it and kind of doing other little consulting projects, blah, blah, blah. Got absorbed a lot of background about digital cellular network, mostly on the handset side. But one of the projects we did was about how do we make infrastructure kit out of handset kit. And this was a project for Mercury 121 back in the day, right? So they knew exactly how much they paid for a handset, and they knew exactly how much they paid for a base station. Why does a base station cost so much more than a handset when it does, it's 8 time slots on a base station and 1 on a handset? It should be kind of maximum 8-1, but they're more like 100-1 or something.
Right.
So that was the project I led. And then that turned into, well, let's make a base station business out of what we learned. Right. And that was how IP Access emerged, was this idea of making infrastructure out of handset components. That idea kind of just sort of drifted away when we realized actually it wasn't, you couldn't really, you could make the first products that way, but you couldn't make a long-term product line because the components weren't really spec'd and people weren't interested in maintaining a product that was dual infrastructure and handset.
Is there slight regret now that IP Access is sort of, because we're trying to create UK champions, and it's now it could have evolved into a 4G, 5G player in its own right, maybe, but it's now owned by an American company, and it's gone the way of Marconi and some of the other ones from those days.
But you're telling the same story, right? That we started with, right? Over consolidation. You end up all the diversity. Even before 2000, we had Marconi. When was Marconi bought by Ericsson?
I can't even remember.
In the 90s.
But I mean, this period we've gone through where we used to have, and Howard Watson at BT has talked about this a few times. He said, I used to be in the telecom industry and we had all these equipment makers of our own, and now we don't have any. So it's part of the mission of UKTIN. Is the ultimate ambition to sort of create another Marconi or Ericsson from scratch?
Not explicitly, but it's there to provide there's a sort of convening function, bringing people together who have the bits for the next generation of network, whatever it happens to be. Our job is not to specify that network or pick a winner or anything like that.
I was going to say, because that's the easy thing to get twitchy about when the public sector's involved, is picking a winner.
Yeah, no, it's not our job. So,
but you do have some discretion on allocation of funds, so it doesn't.
We're not a funding organisation either. Just in avoidance of doubt. No,
I seem to remember some story we wrote about how there was, maybe it's the digital catapult I'm thinking about, where there was some budget attached to that, or am I just getting it completely tangled up with something else? I might be.
Well, they receive some funding, the digital catapult from the government, but they don't. They use that for their own.
But you're there just to sort of advise and incubate rather than invest.
Exactly. But we are funded. The project. The UKTIN project is funded by DCIT.
Yeah.
So we have an agenda which we have essentially a contract with DCIT that involves organising things to guide. One of our functions, for instance, is a specialist supplier guidance function. So we help companies find each other. If they're looking,
hence the network part.
Yes. So in particular, that gets used most, actually, or has been used most historically with the Open Networks program, this 250 million quid that gets talked about a lot.
Yeah, maybe that's what I was thinking of.
It's now all been committed now, but so we organise the sort of
the get-togethers,
the get-togethers for that, and also provide, between the get-togethers, provide services to allow companies who are saying, look, we want to enter this, we want to find a consortium that has this kind of player and this kind of player. Who do you know? And then we sort of make those introductions. And
is it sort of so kind of starting small and seeing where it could potentially go then in terms of trying to create something?
Yeah,
that
I mean, we
is
don't have a size limit
option.
on the companies we work with.
Yeah,
but sort of almost of necessity, the companies, the startups coming out of universities are small, but almost by definition. So we don't. Yeah. We do work with a lot of small companies.
Do you think the government is kind of ambitious enough? Because if you look at I remember writing, I think, about there was some money dispersed recently for Open RAN, kind of specifically startups, and sort of 88 million, which sounds okay, but you break it up amongst a lot of companies, it's not much each. And then you think, well, let's look at what R&D is being spent by the big Nordic guys. And then some of these other countries seem to be incredibly ambitious as well. You look at India these days, everyone's talking about having a homegrown equipment sector, and you see what's coming out of Japan. Whenever I've talked to sort of Rakuten in the past, they've always mentioned, without going into the details, a lot about government support. I'm just wondering whether, if we want to do this, we need to be in it a bit more almost. It's going against my protectionist instinct,
but I was going to say, just jumped sides of the table there. Very happy to hear that. Scott, what do you think about that?
Well, I guess his rationale is not an absolutist, but seeing as we're doing it, let's do it properly. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sort of,
if you subscribe to the philosophy, then we need to get into it a bit more than we are. The sums that the other one that occurs to me now off the top of my head is the CHIPS Act in America, where they're putting vast amounts into into chip producing, and I know there's an aspiration, I think, in the UK to have more technology independence there as well, but we don't have anything comparable really.
It's a different background, isn't it? The US has got at least one of the major fabs, up to the minute. Yeah, for sure. Can make components.
Well, they're a bit short. Intel's a bit short of TSMC and Samsung at the moment. They won't thank me for saying.
They're in the
they're up there.
It's there or thereabouts.
They're good. They're a solid third. Yeah. I'll give them that.
They have aspirations to be ahead.
Yeah. Well, they were once. Well, they could as it's been well publicised, they kind of felt.
But there's something to build on there, which in the UK there is no fact. In terms of bulk CMOS, anyway, in compound semiconductor,
we're quite good there, aren't we? Apparently,
exactly. Yeah, it's a different question.
God, I don't know what the difference between those things are. Do you understand that?
A little bit, but only when Andy Sellers explains it to me.
Yeah, he's quite good at that. Yeah. So CMOS is what most stuff is made of, right? Computers and memory and so on is made of CMOS. More specialist stuff like
gallium nitride, isn't it?
Yeah, power electronics for radio for transmitters and for power conversion equipment, for instance, is gallium nitride.
They're bigger transistor sizes, like 28 nanometer or up. I think they're not.
We used to.
But they're widely used.
I used to chat to the chip people when I was at Strategy Analytics, and they had a whole thing on gallium nitride, and I thought, what's that? And then wasn't curious enough to find out. So there we are. Yeah. Now I know. Anyway,
it sounds like a poison the KGB would use.
It does sound a bit. Yeah, it sounds like someone ends up with it in a UK hospital.
What about indium phosphide? How do you like that? Do you like that one?
Indium phosphide.
Indium phosphide.
Oh, indium. I was going to say Indian phosphide.
Did you brush your teeth with it?
Well, they come out very sparkly. So, but yeah. So and optoelectronics, right? A lot of laser diodes and receivers are made of that sort of stuff.
Okay.
And as Ian says, we're quite good at it, and it doesn't get built to the same scale. You don't get a sort of million transistor chip of gallium arsenide.
We're also quite good at the instruction set designs as well, obviously with ARM, but
and Imagination Technologies.
Is that an English company, a British company anymore?
Well, so Ian and I were having this chat beforehand on the general topic of protectionism, and Ian sort of framed it as like, should we have let SoftBank buy ARM? And I got all small government and laissez-faire, and like it's not for us to allow it, or otherwise you let the market function. But I
wonder
think
if it would have gone ahead now. Today, because this was what
almost certainly not.
2018, 2017.
I feel like we're more generally certainly since China was framed as the big geopolitical sort of antagonist, I think we're more generally protectionist. All this stuff, the CHIPS Act, all this stuff that's going on, as we've said, we haven't mentioned them by name, but we would previously have been talking about Ericsson, Nokia, Huawei, and ZTE, and obviously we're not allowed to talk about Huawei and ZTE anymore because of geopolitical things above our pay grade, as you put it. So I think the answer to that is it probably would have been blocked now.
I'd be surprised if they allowed it to go ahead or didn't look at it in more scrutiny than they seemed to at the time, when it seemed to happen very quickly. But
I just find talk of who owns a company, it just doesn't excite me. I mean, they're still HQ'd in Cambridge, in that same place next to a field where I went to visit them. The one and only cover story I did for Mobile Communications International when I started this job. Before I did one print magazine and just saw the back of it. So I don't know if what that says about me.
They can't blame that on you then if you'd only been here a month or whatever.
No. So let me tell a little UKTIN story. One of the things we're trying to do on that theme, right? We're not trying to create the next ARM, next homegrown, although that would be nice. But one of the things we're trying to do is we've just recently started an activity called the Standards Working Group. And one of the consequences of all that, the ownership going broad of all of these companies, like Marconi ending up in Sweden, for example, is that all the intellectual property that is embedded in those products, invented by those companies, now ends up somewhere else. So and therefore the rights to use those products belong somewhere else, right? So for the most part, there's this thing called FRAND. Have you come across that?
Fair and reasonable,
non-discriminatory licensing.
Patent thing.
If you license your tech into a standard, if it becomes standards essential, then the rules of ETSI and many other standards organisations require you to do that under FRAND terms. So anybody, like IP Access, as a case in point, can license all the IP that it needs to build a product from those license holders.
Yeah, so the point is, if you've got a standard essential patent, you can't hold people over a barrel and extort too much from them. Yeah.
But the thing is, that's a kind of fairly fragile bridge you're relying on, right? Because there's a lot of non-standard essential patents that you need.
It almost seems to be hard to determine what's what as well, and it seems like a bit of a gentleman's agreement rather than between the big guys. There's essentially a big pile of. Usually those conversations happen. You try and say, you get an approach by a corporate lawyer of some sort, and the thump of several kilos.
Here's our patents.
Yeah, here's our.
How big's your pile, son?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a sort of mutually assured destruction thing, isn't it? Well, people, you say it's a gentleman's agreement, but it's basically going. I remember, I think it was Nortel. I remember once when a bunch of Nortel IP was up for sale, and it's basically known that people were stockpiling their patents just so they could put them on the pile that Nick was just describing. Next time they end up in a pissing competition.
There's some lawyers to go through.
Yeah, and people assert standards essentiality. And you have to argue against it, right? Because you're the small guy and you're the big guy, you have to kind of fix that. So this activity within UKTIN to try and get, and of course the end result of that is that small companies have just shied away. They've got sort of gun shy of the whole standards activity. Okay, they have to comply with it, but getting involved in it and having all those nasty arguments and bond fights around who owns what, they don't have anything to do with it. But when the end result is that nobody owns anything in the UK really, in a standard, right? So, which again is a kind of long-term malaise really that we're trying to
and the security risk and that sort of thing.
So there's a standards role within UKTIN to try and get those guys forward.
Yeah, we're trying to educate people, educate them, inform them, get them persuaded again of the value of having a standards essential patent that you own, right? Because it's tradable. Valuable in many ways.
I'm assuming that's one of the areas, and in a sec I'm going to ask a sort of final UKTIN question. But you can see why these pods go on for 2 hours because it's amazing. We've been talking for over half an hour now, and it feels like it flies by. Because
can I ask one more
thing?
We're
just meandering around. Okay, well, I'll let you ask one first, and I'll ask my final one. But I presume that's one of the reasons why academia is a big part of what you do, because where some of this research is going to take place, and some of these patents and pieces of intellectual property might originate, it could be academia, or at least you get some places where they have got quite a good partnership between academia and private sector, like Surrey, like I think Sussex had quite a good one. Was it? I think it was an optical company came out of Sussex, Southampton. Anyway, so yeah, that's probably that. Anyway, Ian, what was?
No, I was just wondering about this sort of engagement you've got with the big UK telcos, and how kind of involved you are with them, because some of them do talk quite a lot about wanting to have homegrown alternatives, and they're interested in concepts like Open RAN. Some of them seem less bothered about it, but yeah, I mean,
you will have heard Andrea Donna talking at Fuse about. I'm not entirely sure how you say Fuse.
Fuse, yeah. No, I did. So. I was in the front row.
You were there. So you heard him say that Open RAN kit is now more efficient, cheaper, easier to put together, easier to maintain than the closed RAN kit. First time the perceived wisdom before that was, at least to my understanding, was that Open RAN was, they were these islands of interoperability that, people had checked their kit with each other and it sort of worked, but it wasn't really up to the mark, the sort of things that the majors would provide. That's the first time I've heard an operator say the opposite, say that actually it's now ready for prime time.
I mean, although they've got to put their they've got to sort of show it, I guess, at scale and in kind of numbers. But yeah, he was publicly talking about it. Exactly. But do they sort of get involved with some of the smaller companies that you might be working with and representing? Do they take an active interest in wanting to make use of them and engage with them as opposed to Samsung?
So the most obvious way in which they do that is through these open network funding vehicles. So the consortiums that are formed, many of them will have an operator of some sort in there, whether it be one of the majors or a smaller one like Telit, for instance.
I'm aware of them.
So that's the most obvious way. We have an advisory board. We have lots of expert groups of one sort or another. We have an advisory board with operator representation on it, and we have expert working groups. All these. So we haven't really talked about the UKTIN agenda, but
that's going to be my final question. That's good.
The answer will go on and on. I can tell
right. You. Okay. Well, I might have to cut you short.
But one of the things, so the future capability section of UKTIN. So we're working with small bit, trying to encourage diversification, resilience, innovation, and using small businesses as the vehicle for that, but not exclusively, and trying to bring them up the TRL scale as the nomenclature goes. You get them from university-based concepts to product that works, that's deployable, maintainable, valuable, and get it deployed. And so one of the things that is one of the many things that we're doing with them is working with experts from around the industry to set a roadmap, if you like, for if we're going to innovate about something, we need to innovate about something which is meaningful, right? So we need to think about the big questions about next generation networks. 6G obviously has its own kind of priorities and agenda and so on. But what do we do about today's networks? If the operating cost of a network is, you mentioned this in the intro about operators are getting to the point where they're having to make these strange business decisions about selling off their assets.
On which more in a bit,
to make their businesses look leaner and therefore more profitable. The operating cost of those networks then is the contributor to that move, right? So the cost, your electricity bill, if you're an operator, is a major element of your cost base. And so, what can we do as innovators to, look back to the compound semiconductors as an example, right? How can we innovate using new materials, new architectures, new software, new photonics to make the networks, fixed networks, and the mobile networks, and the satellite networks, by the way, cheaper to run, cheaper to maintain.
Makes sense, and that's that sort of overlaps with the broader sort of eco thing. There's two ways of approaching the eco narrative. One is the more Greta Thunberg, everyone's just got to stop doing stuff, and the other one is just to which is obviously the only sustainable, to coin a phrase, the only sustainable and useful and realistic one, which is for technology to enable us to do the same stuff or more, but at a lower energy footprint.
Yeah.
So just moving on. So give you the opportunity. I mean, what I suspect you were getting at, and what I want to ask about is, ultimately a sort of final.
So he's got a picture up of you, and from the side it didn't look like you at all. But
yes, this is what Andrew took when he met you in April.
Yeah. I've got the same suit on. That's the most embarrassing thing.
Is it the same suit?
Looks like I only got one suit.
Shame you're not wearing a tie. I could see you've only got one tie as well.
I only ever wear the same suit.
It does look like it's the same shirt, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, Scott, look who's talking.
Yeah. One of my 5 or 10 metal T-shirts.
I do have more than one white shirt.
All right.
I have to tell the audience.
Yeah. I mean, the ultimate question, I suppose, which you were leading up to, and I've just got one specific sub-question within that, is like, what's the point of UKTIN? I don't mean that in a facetious way. And then, you're talking about how you've got this sort of finite window and you're empowered by the government to get stuff done. I'm just wondering if you can share them or if you can allude to them, what the sort of primary KPIs are. By the time you get to the end of that window, what are you going to want to have demonstrated?
So as many people innovating, so there's some numbers that we can measure, right? But in broad terms, as many people innovating with each other as we can achieve. And that means, so companies that have joined the network in the last year, by the end of the program, will have partnered, collaborated, found a customer, got their product readier for market.
And how's that going? Have you got some?
So far, so good. So yeah. I have some numbers.
Go for it. Go for it.
So in terms of we have this innovation platform which is about bringing companies out of universities, small businesses with a germ of an idea, getting them to product, getting them up the TRL scale, and we have an innovation platform which we've inherited from Set Squared. I don't know if does Set Squared ring a bell? So Southeast universities, Bristol, Bath, Exeter, that group.
Southwest, isn't it?
Anyway, Set Squared.
Could be a geographical pedant
so
there.
That area of UK.
Don't worry.
No, you're not going to cut that out either, are you? But
afraid not, mate.
Yeah.
There are worse
yourself, so that's all right.
There are worse gaffes to make than a minor geographical faux pas.
Anyway, so we're using the Set Square platform, and really, so far 125 SMEs signed up to that platform, and they go through a sort of training course, if you like, an upskilling course on innovation, how to innovate with your product, commercial awareness, the sort of issues around product management is just about, there is that big transition when you're in a small business. Your first customer, you're just like an engineering services business, right? You've got one customer, one product, one idea. That's all you do is just make that for that one customer. You're just doing engineering services. As soon as you get more than one customer, more than one product, you need product management. And that's a big transition for a small company to go through.
Right.
And so helping them get through that is really important.
And lots of stuff to do with scaling and all that.
The whole scale thing, because that is the observation. I think anybody you speak to in this space says UK is really good at innovating or originating ideas.
But not so good at scaling and making it into a big thing.
Exactly. You get to a certain point, and then you need to scale. So what do you do then? And you go, oh shit. And some US
that will buy it for 10 mil, and then suddenly it's worth a bill once they've.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
How do we let that happen? To your point earlier. So that's our job, is to try and get people to that point where they can scale beyond that chasm, and so as many of those as we can see.
That seems worthwhile.
Yeah, thank you. Glad you agree. Yeah. So they're going through that cycle, if you like, sort of tens at a time over the next period. So we'll end up with a nice number. I'm going to remember what the target number is, but. It's so far 125 on the platform. So we're 125
businesses, organisations on the platform since earlier this year. That's not bad.
It's a decent number.
Yeah.
Cool. 90. So we haven't talked about the skills gap. So everybody talks about the skills gap, right? Yep. So there aren't enough people to do what needs to be done. Telecoms is the same. Telecoms has a brand image amongst kind of careerists, right? So people coming out of school, coming out of university, looking to change career.
They'd rather go to Google or whatever.
That's not an easy job these days either, is it?
No.
So,
but I mean, in terms of brand,
yeah, exactly.
The Silicon Valley ones are a bit sexier.
They'd like to go to AI or
OpenAI,
or whatever, like to do something like that, right? Actually, AI in particular, it's quite a lot to offer telecoms, actually. And so we're good with that. If people want to become
giving me a good segue as well. But no, I don't want to butt in. Finish your point, please.
But yeah, so the getting people back into telecoms so that we can do the innovation that the solution requires is
maybe
one of the things.
Maybe when I'm trying to get my son to find a worthy career, I'll go, come on, mate, give telecoms a go. He's not showing much sign of interest in that area, given his dad's the editor of Telecoms.com.
So I'm interested in your feedback on this, actually. So,
bless you.
One of the things we've observed is that telecoms itself is a bit of a turn-off when you're talking to. What's telecoms? It's talking to people on the phone, isn't it? It's what my dad does.
Right.
That's an observation. I just wonder if you get the same.
Oh yeah, I don't think people. It's funny, you talk to people about what Nokia and Ericsson do these days, and they go, well, all the phones come from Apple or Samsung, so what are they for?
Well, most people don't even understand. We were talking about Joe Rogan, where he would be talking about Huawei, and he only understood Huawei as a handset maker.
And I've said this to, like, intelligent people, like, he's not that intelligent, actually, my oldest son. But kidding, Rafa, if you're watching. But they're like, well, what do those guys do then? What exactly do they do? And it's like, well, they make the networks, they make the network equipment, and it's almost like there's this gobsmacked look, like, what is that then? People just expect these phones to actually work.
There's a bit of string between your phone and the other phone. Or
exactly, they make the bit of string. Yeah, so that's the wireless sky.
Yeah. No, it's true because it's abstract, it's intangible.
Yeah.
So it is hard. I mean, before I got this job, I was on the handset side, and I was an analyst on the handset side, and then before that, I sort of general consumer tech. And there's so much stuff. There's so much abstract stuff to get your head around, and acronyms, and and even now, like 9+ years into the job, I'm just aware of how little I know. But that's one of the fun things about doing the podcast. We get people like you on who've forgotten more about this stuff than I'll probably ever know.
But I think it's depressing because it's incredibly important. It is critical infrastructure, and it's always in the news. It's very geopolitical. It's very software based these days. So you have to be very smart. You have to be very capable. You can earn. I think there is an image problem, I think, that needs to be changed. I don't know what can be done about that, really, but
we don't
because people do think it's just like you say, talking on the phone. That's not what you would do if you worked in telecom in kind of one of the key roles. But
I think podcast with drunk middle-aged men is the way forward. So on that note, if you don't mind, do you have any other last thoughts before I move it on? Okay, cool. Yeah. It's only in time. It's an unpleasant part of being the host of a podcast that you have to cut conversations shorter than you want to, and you can see again why they often go on for so long. Because
3 numbers.
Yeah, you go for it.
Yeah.
So in talking to the skills gap, right? So we've organised a program. We call it the UKTIN Talent Program, getting people back in, trying to get people into the industry for the first time, getting them back into the industry if they've drifted away from it. So 97 organisations and individuals now engaged with that. Kind of, that means careers organisations, careers fairs, bringing people back into that. And so an easy measurement there, by the end of that program, how many people have we actually influenced to rejoin the industry?
Right.
So that's a
tough one to attribute directly to you.
We'll take it.
Yeah, exactly.
Are the universities themselves doing enough in terms of the training that's needed to get people into that kind of sector?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about telecoms as an application of AI, then yes, they are.
Yep.
Yeah, and other similar.
He keeps teasing me with these segues.
Yeah, and and other similar things like
and we got like Surrey. We went to Surrey. They've obviously got some stuff going on there
for sure. Yeah.
But it does make you wonder how many people, and presumably there's data on this, how many people are doing undergrad and postgrad stuff that's directly telecoms-y. Because I mean, you think of the amount of bullshit degrees that people do, and actually going and just getting something. I would have thought getting even an undergrad qualification, something telecoms-y, would put you in a really strong position to get a fairly decent job. Because I bet there aren't that many of them. I don't know. Is that misguided speculation?
Telecoms is such a broad field, right? You could be a digital hardware designer. You could be a radio, an RF designer.
Yeah.
You could be on the hardware side. You could be that. You can be the software, the platform specialist.
Deep sea cable designer.
Oh yeah. So at the other end of the extreme, somebody who actually knows how to splice fibers together, right?
Yeah, indeed.
Really short supply. You're actually getting fiber built out.
That was my point. I feel like all of those are in short supply.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay. Look, I keep threatening to move it on, and you keep offering me the AI segue.
I do. One of the you're going to take it soon.
You still got your date.
Yeah.
It's our fault. We keep interrupting you. I'll shut up now.
So one of the other big program, we talked a bit about road mapping. So 94 voluntary, senior experts in telecoms in 9 technology fields, such as AI, network management, fixed networks, non-terrestrial networks, a range of things, standards being one of them, and actually growing as we speak. A bunch of new dialogues. We talked about the specialist supplier guidance, actually getting people matchmaking people into consortiums or finding ways to market, finding partnerships, collaborations to get people to market. A good 60 of those ongoing as we speak. We've got an adoption agenda that's going on. We're serving 4 different vertical markets there, such as manufacturing, agri-tech, health and social care, and transport. And then there's a place-based vertical as well. So getting coverage out into.
Oh, don't get me started on the police and telecoms.
Place.
Oh, I thought you said police.
No. No, I don't want to talk about the ESN either, if that's okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, so a lot of people involved now in the UKTIN in a very energetic way, doing a wide range of things. People talk about us boiling the ocean, and like, you guys are just crazy. You're just going to boil the ocean, trying to boil the ocean. And yeah, we kind of react a bit about that, but then actually think, that's not a bad idea.
Boil the ocean.
Boil the ocean as a negative thing, right? So you guys just try to do too much. You're spreading yourself too thin.
Oh, I see. Right, heating up the whole ocean. Right. Okay.
I like the skill side of it. Actually, I think I'm a big fan. My protectionism thing. I think the skills side, I think, is like a really good mission to. I think we should definitely try and bring more people through. There seem to be too many people doing like what I would call airy-fairy degrees, like the one that I did these days, and it's
Mickey Mouse degrees.
Yeah, which won't lead to anything. I fear in the future.
Or you got my son who's not at university, but he's working at a pub, and that's fine. But at some stage, I'm going to want him to not be working at a pub anymore. And if
you would hope he wouldn't want to work in a pub anymore, would you?
No, I mean, I'm kind of counting on him getting bored. He's not showing much sign of it yet.
He might take over the pub and then start his own pub chain off that expands across Europe.
Well, I think I reckon a safer bet would be getting into telecoms. If at this stage I could choose whether he's going to get into the pub game or the telecoms game, I'd go for the latter. But anyway, have I interrupted again?
I've got to the end of my numbers.
You've got to the end of your numbers, right? Well, I'm gonna steam in now then, and I'm gonna say it's funny you bring up AI
several times
because that's given me a really good segue. But thanks a lot for that. That's really interesting, and obviously you got an open invitation, maybe in a year's time or whatever, to give us a sort of update on how things are going.
Yeah, I'll put it in the diary right now.
Yeah, please do. And what was I going to say? Yeah. So AI. So on to other news that we had this week. There was this big conference in the UK in Bletchley Park, which is where the Enigma, Alan Turing stuff happened. Mm-hmm. We really hang on to the coattails of a bit of World War II code breaking, don't we?
I think we're going to make reference to the archers at Agincourt any minute now.
Do you know what I mean?
And say how great they were.
Yeah, that's where this gesture came from, wasn't it? That was us to them.
Camelot.
Yeah, exactly.
It's on your model.
It's in your general direction.
There we go. So there we are. We're still quite proud of being able to crack that German code in the Second World War.
That was a worthwhile
piece. It was good effort. And so we had and it's quite a big deal in terms of the amount of international exposure. Pierre and I were listening to a recent Joe Rogan podcast where we had Elon Musk on, and he was going, yes, and I'm going to go to England. I'm going to go to Bletchley Park. That's my best Elon Musk impression. Have you got a better one? You're giving me a look.
No.
All right.
I've not heard him done that way before.
Oh yeah, he's got a weird laugh, hasn't he?
Like that, yeah.
He has got a very weird laugh.
Really loud.
Yeah, and it's really incongruous because he's quite soft-spoken otherwise.
And all of a sudden he's just like...
Yeah, I know. I was getting that. But anyway, he was on Rogan and he was talking about...
I need to listen to more Elon Musk stuff.
Well, do you know what? This particular one, I thought he came over quite well. He's quite relaxed. I mean, he's still quite geeky and intense and very bright. You what?
What's wrong with that?
Well, indeed. No, I'm just talking about accessibility rather than the absolute merits of being clever.
The only thing I saw of it was Joe Rogan wearing a silly wig and him smoking dope again.
And he had to... No, they were smoking a cigar. He didn't get him to have a joint.
Cigar, was it? Okay.
Yeah, he had to explain that fancy dress for me. Apparently some rando had been spotted that
in a crowd
looked a lot like Joe Rogan.
With that wig?
Yeah. No, but his hair was actually like that.
Oh, okay.
No, I think the guy was wearing a wig too.
Oh, was it? Okay.
But his face looks like Joe Rogan, so he just went with that. Anyway.
Right. Well, no one really understood. And he didn't explain it on the pod, did he?
No, but it was
so bizarre.
Funny.
Yeah. But it was an interesting chat, and there was lots of stuff talking about Tesla, stuff which isn't relevant to this. But then he did mention the fact that he was about to shoot off, straight after that pod to get on a plane and come to England and do this thing. So that's the kind of massive exposure when you consider the platform that Joe Rogan.
I got to go to England, and then he ran off at the end.
More or less, yeah. I'm going to have to work on my Elon Musk impression.
Yeah, because I think they were recording at like midnight.
Right.
Because they mentioned it's 11 p.m. when they ordered pizza, and then I think he was just taking, I guess, his red eye.
It was hilarious. I was just saying, because Pierre messaged me to say it was on, and I was messaging about it. You know, I get a lot of podcasting cues from being a Joe Rogan fan, i.e. the completely unstructured, just free-form stream of consciousness chat that can go on forever. And I quite like some of the spontaneous stuff they did. Like, he went off on a tangent talking about pizza with double anchovy and double pineapple on it, which is obviously a pretty bizarre combination. And Elon Musk was like, oh, is that nice? And he went, yeah, let's order some. And they just ordered some in and then just scoffed that pizza on the pod. And I quite like that really spontaneous, unstructured.
Did Elon Musk like it?
Munching sounds.
Well, yeah, well, that wasn't...
Yeah, that's why we never have snacks on the table.
We used to. When Jamie was here, he used to eat donuts.
The donuts you can get away with, though, but if you put pretzels on or something, you're in trouble.
Anyway, I digress. So the point is this AI get-together we're having in the UK has got a lot of international attention. And it's quite a big deal. And... I mean, I'll say two things about it before I cue it up. Have you looked into it at all or written about it, Ian?
No.
Okay, so I'm not throwing the ball at you in terms of coverage. I was just checking.
I didn't cover it. I was vaguely aware that it was going on, and it seemed to be in the context of stuff that's already happened this year since generative AI came out, and and everybody being a bit sort of hysterical about AI.
It was a little bit. I mean,
that seemed to be the backdrop to it.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah. I mean. Whether hysteria is justified or not, I think is a key part of the conversation, and quite a fun part because we always make these Terminator references and shit like that.
Yeah, which seem to be going on a lot at the Blitz.
Yeah, right.
It seemed to be all about making Terminator references. Basically.
Oh, was it?
Well, that was my perspective from reading the mainstream news headlines on it. Is that it was?
They're just catching up with my dystopian.
If they take over the world, they'll wipe us out. And Rishi Sunak seemed to sort of.
And that was some of the stuff that Musk was talking about on the Rogan pod, actually.
Yeah.
Just about the danger, just the power of it, and the danger of that power falling into the wrong, in inverted commas.
One thing I did see on LinkedIn from people that I sort of am connected to who do AI in telecom was a bit of pushback on this alarmism about it, that, we need to be conscious of that, where it could ultimately go, and but it's still quite futuristic, and what we really need to be thinking about are more short-term AI issues.
Yeah.
Not it's going to take over the world and destroy us all and release poisonous gases, but more kind of mundane stuff about impact on the workforce and reskilling and how it gets used in operations.
Well, they're all. I mean,
do we have somebody in to supervise it here, but maybe not things like that, day to day stuff.
We can talk about both. To use an American term, we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
But I didn't actually pay any attention to any of it other than.
So I'm going to ask you in a sec, Nick. I'm just going to quickly frame it just from our coverage today, which is written by Nick Wood. His headline was the point of this was always to come out with one of those big sweeping international statements that everyone is a co-signatory for, and we got China over. It was properly global, and there was a minor bit of intrigue like, how come you're letting China in? Well, of course you're letting China in, the second most powerful country in the world,
and the major contributor to AI, I think.
Yeah, quite.
Anyway, we don't want them involved.
Well, there we are.
Then it really will be like Terminator.
but that's one point of view. Anyway, so they ended up with the Bletchley Declaration.
Signed by Xi Jinping.
Which is a hard thing to do, pronounce after a couple of beers. I know. God, you're tempting me to pronounce it as he would, and that'll get me in all sorts of trouble, so I'm not going. It'll be, no, it's got to be Ray Winston, a Bletchley Declaration, isn't it?
Yeah.
When I'm doing a Xi Jinping impression, so I don't get in trouble for sort of stereotyping, I just do him as Ray Winston instead.
And nobody minds that.
No, so. I haven't got in trouble for that yet. Anyway, and
Ray Winston lawyers will be in touch with you soon.
And anyway, here's just the top line of the statement that Nick put in his story. The declaration details that the risks are, quote, best addressed through international cooperation, close quote. Well, no shit. A UK government statement, said a UK government statement, as part, and then open quote again, as part of agreeing a forward process for international collaboration on frontier AI safety, the Republic of Korea has agreed to co-host a mini... I'm already bored. So it's one of those things where they've agreed to have another chat about it in a bit. And I'm sure there is
like
some...
climate change.
I'm being quite superficial about it. I'm sure there was some substance in it. But my top line is it feels like one of those, we all agreed that you got to keep an eye on this so it doesn't get too moody, and we're going to have another chat in a bit.
Nothing ever comes out of these sorts of meetings.
Yeah.
Because,
well, anyway.
Yeah.
So Nick... I know that that you've thought about this, so I'll put it over to you. You know, from what you've learnt about this meeting, this declaration, the context of it all. What's your take on it?
Well, AI is a huge subject, right? It's not, and
just a bit.
I have a telecoms lens on that. So
okay.
AI has an impact. Ought to have an impact on telecoms, or positive impact. That's to say, things we talked about earlier about. Reducing power consumption and automation, network automation, all that stuff. Figuring out the customer service is another. That's a moot point. I think whether that makes anything better or worse. Yes, it certainly makes them cheaper, I suppose.
Yeah,
but the network management is an important element, right? Because still, incredibly expensive part of a network operator's cost base is. The people that you need to actually keep the network running, and as you deploy it and as you change things, as you illuminate new spectrum and so on, all that's incredibly expensive but very rule based. So a natural thing to get a robot involved in, and it has happened in isolated cases, is my understanding. I'm not the expert on this, but the experts in our expert working group tell me that that's what's happened. There've been isolated examples where people have put AI in charge of a cell or a few cells, and it's worked successfully. No one has yet plucked up the courage to give their whole network over to an AI.
So that's where it gets a bit scary. It's back to that control thing. And that's where, I know that the Terminator references are laboured, but the really interesting thing about the Terminator films is that moment of truth where they switch on Skynet, isn't it? Where suddenly
switch it off again.
Yeah, suddenly you've just handed over control. And, there's the bit in Terminator 2 where they dramatise that and it's all going well and Skynet's learning exponentially and taking care of everything. And then Skynet goes, hold on a sec.
Yeah. But I think the problem with that is that's back to this alarmism thing, rather than looking at what Nick was saying, where the problem there with giving control over to an AI... They're not really AI systems anyway, let's be honest. It's machine learning or something else, because there's no such thing as
It's not general AI.
Let's be honest. Yeah. But we'll call it that because that's what people call it. But handing it over and cutting people out of the workforce is, I think, it's partly cultural, actually. If something goes wrong, it's like self-driving cars. If you have everybody expects cars driven by people to crash and kill people every day, but as soon as one of those Google vehicles nudges somebody, it's like,
I think something's just happened to a company in California about that. They've said they can't do it anymore.
So it's partly a cultural thing, and that needs kind of looking at and people need to think about it properly. And it's, I think you always need people in the loop because we don't really know. I mean, I've looked at this issue of predictive maintenance where they get systems to extrapolate and work out when problems might arise and what they can do to figure it. And they had engineers not able to... They were looking at some of the results that the system was coming out with and not really understanding them. And I think when you get to the point where an expert isn't quite sure why the machine is saying it should go this way, you probably need to keep somebody in the loop.
Yeah. So it's the extent of automation.
It's the extent to which you go to with automation, I think.
But won't the temptation always be to incrementally automate more until you suddenly get to the point where you realise?
And that's probably the sort of stuff that should be talked about at Bletchley. It's not telecom specific, so it extends to more organisations than that. But rather than have Elon Musk turn up and go, we can't let AI happen because...
Yeah, I don't think he's saying that, to be fair.
No, he's saying we can let it happen if I'm in charge of it, but no other AI can happen because it'll release poison gases. So you need to trust someone like me who believes in free speech and knows how the world should be run.
I don't think, to be fair, and maybe I'm biased in favour of Elon Musk because there's something about him that just amuses me. I just love that.
Well, he is amusing.
I love the uber geekery of the guy, but I don't think he is saying I should be in charge. I think he's saying who should be in charge, which is a good question to ask. And and I mean, I've said it a couple of podcasts ago.
He's certainly saying he should be in charge of free speech.
No, he's saying that I bought Twitter because I wanted to make it more
free speechy,
with
him in charge.
Well, yeah, because that was the only way he could make it is by buying it.
But we're having to buy into his sort of he's the arbiter then of that.
Yeah, and he's not perfect.
It goes back to your point about who makes the decision.
He's totally capricious.
He said he follows the UN kind of way of doing it, where whoever is allowed to speak at the UN, like the Ayatollah, and
right.
He buys into the Ayatollah Khomeini's view of free speech.
What Pandora's box have you just opened, Pierre?
No, but you mentioned it before on Twitter. Like the Ayatollah is allowed to say horrible things.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But
whereas
if you say one
little thing that goes contrary to the culture war tide, then you get banned.
But I think it's important for people to be aware of the Ayatollah, that he exists.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to free speech, I mean, there's law, so that there's specific laws when it comes to things like incitement to violence. Like I've always said, I can't say to someone, go and throw a brick through Ian's window. Mm. But other than that, I'm generally in favour of everything being allowed out there. And if someone says something stupid or offensive or hostile or out of order, then let the crowd, let the general environment shout them down. The cliche is the antidote to bad speech is more speech.
I think one of the, just going back onto the AI stuff, one of the more useful, because this government seems to have this Bletchley thing, and Rishi Sunak and his involvement in this all seems to be about regulation of AI and worrying about it. And I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, but I think that needs to happen in a sensible way. And I'm not sure this was that necessarily. What they don't seem to be doing as much of maybe is what Nick was talking about. How do we get people into software programming, into producing the AI systems that could be used, machine learning systems, whatever you want to call them, that could be useful, that could help to run telecom networks. It'd be great to have the UK viewed as a place where, I mean, it actually seems to have done quite well in that in the past. Google did get its DeepMind from there was a UK company, wasn't it? Or
that was an acquisition, I think.
That was an acquisition of a UK company, so maybe we're not doing too badly. But back certainly,
to Nick's point,
thinking about training,
pick it off and then they buy it.
Training of youngsters to get them into software and not doing useless history degrees like I did. No, history's not a useless subject, but you know what I mean.
There's some proper Mickey Mouse degrees you can do.
It would be good to see more. More thinking about where our AI can fit in our economy, and there didn't seem to be much of that with the Bletchley thing, and there doesn't seem to be much talk of that from Rishi Sunak that I've heard. It all seems to be about the sort of ethics side of it, and
and that's what gets the headlines, and that's what obviously appeals to my lazy stereotypes about dystopian AI stuff. But so let's bring it back a little bit, just to show I'm not totally self-indulgent. Nick, back to the telecoms angle, and also, but I think it is relevant. I mean, I know that you made some comments previously about the safety side of things. So obviously safety's got to be there. Well, AI is an incredibly powerful tool. So there needs to be guardrails, doesn't there?
So the thing I was concerned about, this isn't exactly rocket science, right? Or AI, of course, is rocket science. But just thinking about, you don't need the brain size of a planet to say, I'm not going to give, AI still has, and it may be more in the popular imagination than in truth, but it has this idea of hallucinating. If you take a large language model for and you ask it a question that it doesn't know quite the answer for, it will make something up.
Well, there were some stories when ChatGPT was getting big, and some journalists managed to get it into going a bit mad.
Yeah. So there's a certain kind of telecom carrier gradeness. Let's go. I think that phrase seems to. I don't hear it used much. The idea of 5 nines availability of your network, right?
Yeah.
Does that, as we go from telco to techco, that 5 nines availability thing sort of just seems to fade into the background a little bit. I mean, this is a personal.
Well, but there's that telecoms grade thing. Funnily enough, in the last pod we did from the Network X trade show, I mentioned that there was an announcement with Deutsche Telekom and SK Telecom about what they seem to be positioning as carrier grade AI, and I think Ian's response was, "That's all bullshit." Well, but that seems to be the sort of thing Nick's alluding to.
Only that wasn't their AI.
They were just putting a veneer over.
I mean, I'm not saying those companies aren't heavily involved in AI in the telco space, because they probably are. But that announcement was making out that they'd done much more in the large language models area than they'd actually done. I think they took something from Anthropic and did some fine tuning of it, really. But yeah.
So I mean, selling into telcos, right? One of the reasons it's so hard is because telcos have an enormously long QA cycle, right? And you're taking a product into the network, right? If it pops for any reason, the software or hardware,
it's catastrophic.
That's the end of that. Thank you very much for coming, right? So you need to prove out your kit, software or hardware, both together, obviously, to a degree where the operator is comfortable to put it into the network and not degrade that 5 nines-ness of the network, right? And that's the concern from a telecoms point of view. You're putting something like AI there, which has a tendency to kind of make things up. Are you really going to give that control of your network yet? I mean, it's a question, right? It's just that's the.
Well, maybe that's what we're trying to address. Like, where are we in its maturity?
The other thing that worries me about it is the layers of abstraction. So once you get an AI in to do something, and then there's a tendency we don't need people to do that thing anymore because we've got AI to do it, and then hence nobody understands it. So if something were to go wrong in the future, there's nobody there to fix it. Nokia's come out with this thing this week from this 6G Brooklyn summit that they do, which apparently is like the thing to go to according to Gabriel Brown at Reading. But they've come out with this thing where you can basically issue natural language instructions to your net. So you can get Alexa, fix my network, it's not working, and it will.
You're asking a lot of Alexa there, aren't you?
Oi, fix it.
Oi, network, the base station there in Worcestershire isn't working.
Siri,
on this road.
Sort it out.
Siri, how come I got no signal?
But when it gets to that level of, it sounds brilliant, obviously, and they've clearly made it out to be probably a lot more sophisticated than it is at the moment.
So our headline was Nokia shows off voice-activated self-adapting network.
Once you get into this low-code, no-code world, or even if you're using things like GitHub Copilot to do sort of coding for you, it's like, well, the guys that do understand the coding aren't there anymore because they.
So as you say, layers of abstraction. Layers of distance between a hardcore, cold-face coder.
Yeah, but I hear this is a problem before AI. Like you try and find old C++ programmers now, which is if you talk to someone like Neil McRae, because I'd had a long chat with him at a lunch once about programming and like what he likes, his languages.
He does like a bit of programming.
Yeah, I mean that's like his background, and he's like, all this. Even he was saying like Python really abstracts a lot, and like if you get really deep down into it, you need. I mean, Nick probably knows more about this than I do, but you need to actually know the math and the hardcore stuff, and a lot of the languages are actually really abstracting a lot of the complexity away these days.
It would, because ultimately you're trying to communicate with a chip.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't know where to start.
Actually, in fact, it's not the chip anymore, is it? I mean, in the good old days when you were writing C on Z80s or writing the assembler on Z80s, you knew when you put a variable had a memory location, right? And you changed the value of a variable, you knew the number in that memory location.
Wow,
what it was, right? And now you've got no idea.
No,
you've got no idea. There are layers within the operating system, and
it's just a Linux OS, isn't it? Basically,
and then there's layers on top of that. The language you're writing in now is so abstract, so high level that that variables don't have memory locations anymore. They're objects, and they have methods, and they can move around in memory.
Which seems great superficially, but then there's There was a delegation of power.
Yeah, so I read this great book a few years ago about it's like a guide to the apocalypse. I actually reviewed it. It was back in the days when I was freelancing and I was still doing book reviews for The Observer at the time.
Were you? Yeah. I didn't know you did that.
Yeah, I did book reviews, not any fiction, nothing. They used to send me these weird books.
You still got me fucked to review my book.
Yeah, that's just laziness. But they sent me this book about like how to survive the apocalypse, and this guy had basically written if we were to end up in a situation where a pandemic wipes everybody out, and I mean it's jokey and tongue-in-cheek, but there's actually serious instructions about how to get electricity going again, how to clean it, how to produce like soap, how to
handy book to just have kicking around.
And you're reading it thinking there's a lot of these basic skills that people don't increasingly know how to do.
Yeah.
You kind of worry about 100 years' time where maybe robots do everything and people don't know how to
that's a good point.
Plug in basic components. And,
there was like, the movie with Joe Butler where like there's a comet coming or something, and
Greenland, I think.
Yeah. And he's a builder, so like you'd be like, I wouldn't be on that boat.
Yeah,
none of us in this room will be on this boat.
No, what do we do?
What are our special skills? I can write some telecom stories sometimes. Oh, that's not very useful. You're not on the boat, mate.
Who's going to do the niche trade podcasts in this dystopian
You'd be
future?
like, can you cook? Can you make stuff? No, not really.
Right. Well, talking about another forced segue, because we've got. I know you got to shoot in like 10 minutes, haven't you, Pierre? Talking about redundancies and all that sort of thing. I'm going to throw this to Ian, and we're going to have to do a quite condensed job on it. But there've been a few announcements this week. The three that spring to mind are BT's quarterly today, which I know you wrote about. Yeah. There was Vodafone selling its Spanish operations,
complete with a lovely picture of.
Do you know what? I was just admiring that. He took the picture. We spoke about 2 pods ago. We spoke about going out with BT at Alexandra Palace. And he's put this photo in, taken with his own iPhone.
Wow.
And it's quite arty.
It is very arty.
I think it's pretty cool. Yeah. So it's when we're at Ali Pali and it was raining.
Did a job for doing that.
And you can see, through the rain and the dry ice, you can see nice light beams and everyone's got these clear. Anyway, it's a cool photo. I can see why you put it up there. So you put that on your BT story. It's a bit incongruous for your BT story. So you put a bit self-indulgent.
That's the new EE launch.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. I still think
which is in my headline.
There. Look, he's even put a little source, Ian Morris, like reading.
I have to do that. I get told to.
Whatever. So there's that. There's Vodafone flogging Spain, and then there's some VMO2 results, which seem to also involve some kind of disposal. So the broader theme is telcos are doing all right, but they seem to be constantly flogging stuff or letting people go.
Well, I'm not sure they're doing all right.
Go on then.
Well, I think it's to Nick's point that the sector is it's all about cost and efficiency and trying to find, using AI to find more efficient ways to run your networks or cut your energy bill or whatever. It's that kind of theme really is the one that and it's not unique to the UK. I mean, a lot of the operators globally at the moment are in a similar situation. We were always talking about 5G hasn't really been the big growth story yet. It might be, who knows, but it hasn't been that big growth story. That maybe some earlier generations were, certainly when people were starting to use phones,
things like ARPU and
so that it's a sluggish market. We've got high inflation still, interest rates going up. Nobody really wants to spend money on equipment.
Well, actually, interest rates, they just announced today that they weren't putting them up today for the first time in a while.
Well, but they're higher than they were, weren't they?
Yeah, they're still at a historical high.
And so what are they doing? There's a lot of not spending money on network rollout, which is why we were talked about on previous like the
quarterlies of Nokia and Ericsson,
Ericsson and Nokia, which are really bad at the moment. And then you look at the operators. What are they doing? Well, they're just kind of cutting costs a lot. So that's the theme that unites all of them is cost cutting and asset disposals. I think. I mean, the Vodafone Spain one is Margarita Della Valle has come in from Nick Reed. Vodafone has been perceived to be one of the underperforming big telco stocks. I think in Europe, he'd talked a lot about right sizing the portfolio. I think it's the expression that gets used.
It's lovely. I love phrases like right sizing.
Which means looking at their operations in their big markets and figuring out what to do with them. And the two big plans at the moment. She's actually, credit to her, she's moved quite quickly on things, I think. I can't remember if the Vodafone 3 merger in the UK was in the pipeline, the works before she took over or not. But It's been around a while, and it still looks like it will be around a while. Whether or not the official
bid had been made, I can't remember.
I don't know, but she's moved that on to the bid stage, it seems. Yeah, and then there's this CMA review now, and who knows how long that could take. But if that works out as they want it to work out, then their arguments about not making a decent return should be resolved, basically, because that's the premise for doing it.
It is. They certainly can't moan about that anymore.
And it's a 3-player market unless there's remedies that change all that. So there's a lot of ifs and buts, but at least they kind of seem to be doing something for investors. Vodafone Spain was like a real bar. I didn't realise how bad it was, actually, but I think that's just a nightmare market to be in. They lost out. I think the thing was they lost out with this MásMóvil opportunity to Orange, and they've shed a lot of staff in the last few years in Spain. Revenues have been down like year on year. The quarterly revenues have been sort of dropping. It's loss making, it turned out, because they don't break out the net income in group reports. It's only when they do a deal like this that you actually see it's a loss making business.
Just looking at the quote from her in our story, she goes, "This is Marita Della Valle, who's the CEO of Vodafone now, Vodafone Group. The sale of Vodafone Spain is a key step in right-sizing," there we are, back to that phrase, right-sizing our portfolio for growth, and will enable us to focus our resources on markets with sustainable structures and sufficient local scale, she said, describing Spain as a challenging market with structurally low returns. So that's completely consistent with everything you just said. Turns out you're good at your job, Ian.
So
well done.
So what they raise from that they can use to sort of pay off some debts and and kind of focus on opportunities, hopefully like the UK for them, where it becomes a 3-player opportunity. And
they're keeping the innovation lab.
They're keeping the innovation lab. That was carved out of the deal. So Malaga's still, that's not included.
Which is a big Open RAN.
Big deal.
It's part of its thing, yeah.
And the VMO2 divestment that you mentioned was a bit of so they have a JV on the network side with. I'm
just looking it up. Just catching up with you, mate.
No,
yeah.
Cornerstone with Vodafone's Vantage Towers.
Yeah. There we go.
So Vantage Towers owns 50% of it, and VMO2 owns the other 50%, or did until they sold 16.7%, I think,
1/6
to an investment fund, which
called GLIL.
Which is not
Lil.
Which is actually a continuation of a trend that we see of telcos parking their masts in separate entities and then disposing of a stake, or even in the case of Telefonica, selling more or less the whole thing, I think, in Europe, which I think
makes absolute complete sense. I mean, you get rid of the towers and you start sharing them, right?
Yeah,
there's an obvious cost benefit in doing that. But that was going to continue. You start sharing the towers, you share the equipment, the radios, and so on. You operate them as a shared resource.
So it's more efficient.
The next step is spectrum, right? Then you start sharing the spectrum.
It's almost mergers through the back door, isn't it? In a way.
I mean, So you're divesting these property assets into companies that can operate them better. I mean, it's
fair enough.
Business School 101.
Well, you say it's Business School 101, but and I've never been to business school, so I'll have to take your word for that.
Me neither. I should. I'm extrapolating.
I just want. This is purely a sort of instinctive thing for me, not born of any expertise, but that's never stopped me opining in the past. Just whenever you're selling something that you own, it feels like a little bit of a retreat. I mean, there must have been a reason why you owned it before. There must have been a good reason for owning it.
Well, it used to be. I mean, when networks were starting up, right, coverage was the absolute killer, right? You had to have the best site on top of the hill, or else you got nothing. You got no subscribers, right? And those days are
fair enough,
on, right? I mean, and then,
so you think they're just moving with the times?
Yeah, I think so. And I'd say I think the Vodafone move is on the VMO2 move. I think that's not the end of the story. I think it's going to carry on. There are networks in Europe where they are, where the towercos, Cellnex, I think in this case, is operating the RAN on behalf of multiple operators together.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose that's the only issue I would have with it from a telco perspective, and having always competed on things like coverage or bandwidth and ownership of assets is. It's almost like like Cellnex is a great example now doing RAN, renting out like base stations basically, rather than just a passive infrastructure. And then it's like the actual telcos themselves are sort of retreated from more and more from what they used to do, and they're left with. I mean, maybe that is what they need to do, but then then you're left with them just kind of as service companies.
They're a facade, aren't they, almost?
In a no-growth sector, and then it really puts pressure on them to do this techco stuff that they go on about, but we've not really seen the fruits of it. The BT thing, which is the other one, was driven by...
so your headline was Fibre Fury and 7,000 job cuts show more old BT than new EE, which is what justified you putting your self-aggrandizing photo.
Because that was the new EE launch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they talked a lot about new EE and had Mark Alera wandering around with his fancy T-shirt and, looking like a internet kind of guy rather than a telco. And
he was looking funky.
They got some Britpop sort of era music.
I'm going to read out your first paragraph, because often your first paragraphs are really good fun. Yeah, that's why I want to read it.
All right, go on then.
Embarrass me now. From Agincourt.
Yeah. So Ian, I mean, I'm a big fan of Ian's writing, and he tends to write longer, more analytical pieces, and which allows him the room to just write a first paragraph of just having a bit of fun.
Random bollocks.
And so this is his first paragraph from this thing where I just read out the headline. Anyone around in the late 1990s will recall New Labour, a rebranding exercise by the UK Labour Party that combined PR spin with Britpop music, a lurch to the centre of the political spectrum, and Tony Blair's grin. Under the hood, though, Labour was still a left-wing party of trade unionists run by unhappy-looking men who had just washed off the soot after a hard day mining coal. When it was forced back into opposition, it experienced a Newtonian hard-left recoil with the appointment of Jeremy Corbyn, a comedic version of Stalin as leader. All of this as a pretext to a story about BT. I just quite like the utter self-indulgence of it. It appeals to me.
The next paragraph is...
Yeah, then you justified it. Something similar is going on at BT, he says at the start of his
I mean, to me, BT's trying to sort of reinvent itself as what it probably call a techco, as more like an internet company with this new EE thing, an app store that's not just available to their own customers.
That we chatted about at length 2 pods ago.
And they had this big glitzy launch that Scott and I went to, which that photo's taken from, and behind it all, really, it's still the same old company. What BT is digging up streets. It's a massive pension deficit. It's government interference. It's job cuts. It's unionism. It's an old-fashioned company, really. That's what it's all about. A couple of
fridges to change
and Philip Janssen's involvement in it has made it more that than it actually was under Gavin Patterson. He'd sort of tried to move it into the TV area unsuccessfully. So I think this whole veneer of new EE is that was the parallel, really. That it's at its heart, it's not that, and the whole focus at the moment is, and all the money, by the way, is going on this mission to extend full fibre coverage to, I think it's 25 million 25 million premises by 2026, which they've actually done a pretty good job on. I think it's 12 million now was the update on the.
Yeah, they're very proud of how ahead of the curve they are on fibre.
But it's not. It's all a bit depressing for them, really, because there's not any money to be made from it. They replace money that was spent on old copper line systems with money spent on new fibre because they're essentially the dominant broadband player. They don't really have a huge amount to gain from it, other than defending their broadband business. If they didn't do it, they'd lose market share. And they actually, for the first time, I think. It's interesting, their share price went up a lot today, which I think is all to do with what happened on the Outlook, probably.
Oh, and the Outlook.
The Outlook is probably good, but the numbers moved quite nicely on the sort of bottom line, or EBITDA, as they like adjusted a bit EBITDA. But they did flag up this, we lost broadband customers in areas where we haven't yet rolled out FTTP, which in the past they've always been quite sort of bullish on and I don't know what the word is, but they've been a bit disparaging maybe about some of the altnets as they get called.
And yet they must have lost customers too.
They've lost some customers now in areas where and this shows why they're having to do it really quickly, because if they don't get there first and community fibre is in the neighbourhood, then certain people are going to switch from BT to community fibre. And
okay, listen, I'm going to have to butt in now. I would have given you a last shout on that, but we're totally out of time, I'm afraid, mate. Right. So I'm going to have to.
Oh, that was sudden.
Yeah, it was sudden because I was keeping an eye on the time.
Sorry, I rambled on there.
No, but it's fine. Then. I mean, if it wasn't you rambling on, it would have been me or Nick. Someone's got to ramble on. Otherwise, we haven't got a fucking podcast.
But they did cut 7,000 jobs as well. Hence
No, it's good. It's fine. we always do this. We leave the last segment with about 5 minutes to chat about it, so it has to be condensed. Listen, Nick, I actually think I'm really pleased to have learnt more about UKTIN and what the objectives are of it. Yes. And it does seem positive, and it doesn't really rankle with my small government, keep your nose out of our business sort of stuff. Because if it's just encouraging networking and just catalysing a better scene, then what's not to like? So yeah, let's check back in sometime next year.
Let's do that.
And thanks a lot for coming.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening, and make sure you join us for the next one.